the minivans today are nice. The Toyotas and the Hondas, they're a nice ride. Yeah. You're in a minivan, but it's a comfortable ride.
My Pilot's a panty dropper.
Yeah.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower after Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked out.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, this is the podcast for you. I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash Shitter LeBay.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we will provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. You can find all that information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
Gene, we would not be a genuine 80s or 90s podcast if we did not have a generous supply of Stephen King movies. And that's why tonight I'm very excited to add to the collection when one of our listeners, way back in February of 2021, Matt C. from England, wrote in and said he wanted to commission the 1983 horror classic, Christine.
All right, our commissioner wrote in and said, hi, Ash, Gene, and Big D. Firstly, thanks for all the awesome pod you guys have given us over the years. I can't tell you the amount of times I've re-listened to some of your episodes. One of my favorites being Predator 2. God, that film is a shat show. I guess I can't really explain why I love this film so much without giving you my story. I was born in the last 2 weeks of the 70s and grew up very much as a TV kid in the 80s. I grew up in a small seaside town called Whitstable on the southeast coast of England. I'm mixed race, with my mother being black from a Caribbean island and my father white from Scotland. My mother, brother, and I were literally the only non-whites in town, and when it was time to go to school, my parents are sure I went to private or more elite schools hoping I would avoid racism or discrimination, and by and large it worked. I never felt different to my peers, but I knew deep down that there was something, and I would often isolate myself and take solace in books and movies. On getting my driver's license at age 17, the sense of freedom was amazing, and I spent every spare moment cruising around with my friends and was very in love with my first car. And as a fanaticist and a massive dreamer, I found it very easy to get attached. And that leads me to Christine. Imagining that my car was alive, had a soul, could fix itself, would protect me, and keep coming back for more stirred something deep within me. Although I knew it wasn't real, I couldn't help wishing. The relationship between Arnie and Christine, although horribly toxic, was somehow intoxicating to me, and his subsequent transformation was all the more impactful considering his humble beginnings. And of course, no 80s film would be complete with the school kid that was clearly in his late 40s. Thank you, Buddy, for being the hairy, scary, knife-wielding senior that got the comeuppance he so richly deserved. I must end by saying that until I watched the Maximum Overdrive trailer during your episode, I had no idea that King was such a mentalist. But I think I can forgive him, as he got the formula right with this movie. It had suspense, scares, and overall a pretty good cast, with the car definitely being the star. Anyway, I've rambled on enough, so thank you for indulging me. Cheers to you all. Enjoy and do your worst. Love from the UK, Matt the Shat.
Well, Christine is a 1983 horror film directed by John Carpenter and starring Keith Gordon, John Stockwell, Alexandra Paul, Robert Prosky, and Harry Dean Stanton. Based on Stephen King's novel of the same name, the movie follows the changes in the life of Arnie Cunningham after he buys a classic red and white 1958 Plymouth Fury named Christine, a car that seems to have a mind of its own and a jealous, possessive personality. The movie was marketed with the tagline, Body by Plymouth, Soul by Satan, and grossed $21 million at the U.S. box office. It received mostly positive reviews from critics and has since become a cult classic. A remake is currently in development. So Big D, Ash, we always ask where you were and what your memories are of the movie we're covering. Today it's Christine. Big D, let's start with you.
So when this came out, I was about 9 or 10. And I remember on HBO, late at night, they would show horror films when my parents would go to bed. And there were 2 Stephen King films in particular that scared the shit out of me. One was Cujo, and one was this movie, Christine. Now, they're very different. Cujo, I could relate to the little kid trapped in the front seat of that car as the dog is attacking. And this one, it was the idea of some unstoppable machine just coming to life and hunting and tracking me down. And I can remember thinking, man, if I was in school, I would just be extra nice to Arnie and Christine and hope that she would not choose to kill me. But this movie terrified me. And watching it now, I felt like that little boy back in 1984.
I feel like I don't even know you. You were a child of appeasement? That was your strategy as a kid? You just wanted to make nice with anything that was threatening to you?
Yes, I'm not going to try to fight this demon car.
You're a giant child.
Oh, no, but I was a fat, slow child who was very passive. I only grew to be aggressive and more assertive later in life. Back then, I was like, leave me alone.
Wait, is current Big D peak aggression for Big D?
No, it was the military. Like when I was in the army, I was kicking people downstairs and doing not nice things. But so right now, I think I'm less aggressive. I'm somewhere in the middle in a happy place. It was my birthday, so I'm 49 now. So I think I've mellowed in my old age.
Wow. 10 years older. I didn't realize you were 10 exact years older than me.
Now think about that, Ash, when you say we're not that much older than you.
Well, you're not.
That's true.
You're only like 3.
You're such
As
an
we've
ageist.
established, though, it's a very important 3 years.
Oh, my God.
Well, happy birthday, Big D. Once again, I fucked up. I mixed up 2 movies because I am old as well. And I thought Christine was Carrie. Totally different movie. And when I discovered that it was a different movie, I was so excited to see another John Carpenter film because I love John Carpenter. I think the podcast has made me a fan of his work. And I got to say, Maddie, you delivered on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I have made no qualms on this pod about the fact that I am a huge fan of Stephen King. I love him. But this is one that I was never really able to get into in terms of the book. I read the book, but a conscious car, just on page didn't really seem that scary to me. So I never saw the movie. I was just really holding out hope that it was going to be better than Maximum Overdrive. And it was. So bonus.
Yeah,
and I, like Eugene, I'm a huge John Carpenter fan. So combine King and Carpenter, I figured, we might have a little bit of a win here.
All right, well, let's rev this baby up and hit the trailer.
Sonny, you ever owned a car before?
No. I just got my license.
Start her up. Her name's Christine.
I
Obsessed with it. And you know what else? They told us the man who owned that car last died in it.
What do you know about that car?
I know that the guy who owned the car before Arnie, his daughter choked to death in Christine.
It's that car. I swear it's the car.
How's Christine coming?
Oh, Cherry.
That's funny, because I heard she was total.
Well, after I cleaned up the broken glass, it wasn't so bad.
So what if you fix it up, and he just comes back and does it again?
He won't do it again.
57, the hood of a newly assembled Plymouth Fury abruptly slams down and crushes the hand of a line worker inspecting its front end. Another worker climbs in to sit behind the wheel, letting the ash from his cigar fall in the front seat. At the end of the shift, the line supervisor notices the car's radio is playing music, and when he opens the door to shut it off, the worker's corpse falls out onto the floor.
So as we've discovered in our Stephen King revisit, his movies are a little uneven recently. You get some good, you get some bad. But if you go back into 83, King, he was the gold standard in Hollywood. He'd already produced The Dead Zone, Cujo, Creepshow, The Shining, Salem's Lot, Gene, the other car movie, Carrie. He'd done them all. So Christine comes out. The studio bought the rights to the screenplay even before the book was released. So I couldn't believe in the same year, book is released, film comes out months later. This was a big deal.
Well, I think what's crazy too is if you look at the timeline, a lot of authors are much more like George R.R. Martin than they are King. Like there's these huge swaths of time between books that they write, and King is such a prolific writer. Like he just spits shit out because all at the same time they're developing this, they're developing Firestarter, like they're developing all of these different movies that are based off of his writings, a lot again just from manuscripts. And I think that's really fascinating. And I also think it's why it's so hit or miss, is because if you have somebody that takes years in between books, then I think they have time to like, I don't know, edit and figure out if it's actually a good book or not. And King's just kind of like, fuck it. You know, and he just writes it, sees what sticks to the wall in terms of like, see what book actually sells and which one doesn't. But man, the dude, he writes fucking quick.
I mean, they took a gamble, but it really worked out. 'Cause Christine helped me realize I don't dislike film adaptations of Stephen King books. I thought I did. I just dislike when they're made by crappy directors. So you mentioned Carrie, The Shining, Shawshank Redemption. Loads of Stephen King movies were filmed by perfectly competent directors, and they weren't half bad to watch. And here we got John Carpenter. And John Carpenter is no different. From the beginning, he is finding ways to make Christine seem like a living thing, which, Ash, you mentioned is kind of a tough thing to do. It's a fucking sentient car. What are we doing here, right? But you get the feeling through his direction that she's watching those line workers through her mirrors. You could see how she's seducing men with her curves and her music. And John Carpenter is just so good at making even an inanimate object seem supernatural.
Well, I mean, the glow alone, like that car is shiny. Like the way it shines, it looks like it's moving, which was so smart the way that they shot the opening and introduction of her. And I have to say, what I found really interesting is that Carpenter almost didn't do this film. He was interested potentially in doing Firestarter. He started trying to develop it, kind of walked away. And the only reason he agreed to do this was because The Thing had just recently been such a flop. That was his first really big budget failure, which I still don't understand, because I think it's a really brilliant movie.
It's great.
But it was. And he was like, well, shit, I guess I better get another film and get to directing quickly again. And so he took this one on. And if The Thing hadn't been such an embarrassment, we wouldn't have gotten Carpenter doing this. And I'm right there with Eugene. If any other director, like, can you imagine like Michael Bay doing Christine? Like it would just fall so flat because it's such a silly idea. You have to be so serious in your approach to it that you can't find any humor in how ridiculous it is. And what better director than like the most serious of all directors, which is John Carpenter.
And again, we're getting into movie 300, so my memory is starting to blur. I seem to remember that The Thing came out against some huge movie. I feel like it was E.T., so The Thing flopping wasn't due to it, just the movie. I think it was due to the weekend it was released.
Yeah, but I think regardless of it, you had Carpenter coming out there with this movie that was huge budget. Yeah. You had name stars in it, and then it tanks. You got to get on something. I mean, Ash is absolutely right. You got to get on something quick. Your career is over.
Well, and The Thing is such a psychological and like body horror film. I think that's the other thing that like hurt him, is like horror movies of the 80s weren't ready for a movie like The Thing yet. I think if The Thing came out today, because y'all, what ripped off The Thing more than The X-Files? I've been rewatching The X-Files with Finn, and we're only watching certain episodes because some are so scary. But we watched the episode Ice, which is such a ripoff of The Thing, where they're stuck in Alaska and there's the worms in their brains and all of that. So we just weren't ready. We're sorry, John Carpenter. We did you wrong.
An homage. An homage.
It's a ripoff.
Yeah, and Gene, you mentioned the difficulty of giving a personality to an inanimate object. And the movie faced that. And the way they did it was you give it a voice by the use of the radio. Christine can tell you how she's feeling, what she's thinking, by the amazing music that they play. Now, if you want to see this go horribly wrong, I assume that you guys have seen the Michael Bay, the 2007 Transformers.
Yep.
Those robots can't talk either. So you get Bumblebee, who instead of communicating through the radio like they do here, he uses like little sound bites and pieces of recording. It's awful. It does not work. It's garbage. Here starts off the assembly line, and you get George Thorogood's Bad to the Bone coming across. It is amazing. Now, that song has gone from every kid film, every movie subsequently, when you want to show that a character's bad. It could be a cartoon. You play that. This was the first use of this song in a film. It's been used many times since, but it conveys the origin of Christine. It's great. And the songs continue You get when Buddy's crew is trying to destroy Christine, you get Little Richard's Keep a Knockin', but you can't come in. You get Robert and Johnny, We Belong Together, as, you know, Leigh is choking in the drive-thru. When Arnie is dead, spoiler alert, at the end, the radio starts playing Johnny Ace's Pledge to Me. It's incredibly effective. I started to fear anytime they would show the dash that the light was going to come on, it would start playing a song, the engine would rev, and Christine would come to life.
Yeah, and before we get actually, the Transformers could talk. The problem was that Bumblebee's voice translator was broken, so he had to use his radio.
Ugh.
But I agree with you, garbage. Here, though, what I like is John Carpenter was smart enough to keep the best parts of the book. And he's very true to the book in the way he uses the music, because if you've not read it before, each chapter begins with a lyric. And so they mimic that here with changing the different songs as they went, like the different quote unquote chapters throughout the movie. And I liked that. But I also want to give a shout out to the instrumental score, because I think that's one of the best parts of a Carpenter movie. He is so good at helping to compose moody as fuck music. And I kept listening to this and I was like, oh my God, this sounds so much like Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which is one of my favorite horror movies. And so I looked it up and yep, same sample. Season of the Witch, Christine, they sound so much alike.
Well, in September 1978, nerdy teenager Arnold Cunningham's life begins to change when he buys the dilapidated Fury from George LeBay. George tells Arnie several details about the Fury, including its name, Christine. Arnie starts restoring Christine at a do-it-yourself garage, and as Arnie spends more time with Christine, he discards his glasses, dresses more like a 50s greaser, and develops an arrogant, paranoid personality. Arnie's mother tells his friend Dennis that the previous owner, Roland, committed suicide in Christine. Confronted by Dennis, George admits that Roland's daughter had choked to death inside the car and that his wife also committed suicide in it. George forced Roland to get rid of Christine after his wife's death, but Christine returned to him after 3 weeks. So I hate doing maintenance. I hate tinkering. I hate DIY projects. DIY is a 4-letter word as far as I'm concerned. And I come from a family where anything old is considered trash. We don't do antiques. We don't do vintage. But I have a soft spot for vintage vehicles. No touchscreen, no dual zone climate control, no automatic transmission. I don't like fixing them up. Don't get me wrong. I don't like wrenching, but I like to drive them and ride them, right? My vehicles consist of a 1993 Miata, a 2010 Yamaha XT250, and an 89 Honda Hawk NT650 GT. My newest vehicle, like the newest one in the garage, is a 2012 Suzuki V-Strom. And I keep forgetting that that's even a decade old. To me, 2012 is like brand spanking new. So I was delighted to see the car porn in Christine. We've got a 1958 Plymouth Belvedere, which they relabel as a Fury, a 66 Chevy K20, a 67 Camaro, a 71 Volvo, and my favorite is Dennis's 1968 Dodge Charger. These cars fucking bomb. I was drooling.
Yeah, I don't know. I love DIY. We just recently purchased a home that's like 40 plus years old and we're renovating it. And like, it's like the greatest thing ever to go room by room and fix it up. But that's a house. You lose me with the cars. I could care less about cars. I don't care if they're old. I don't care if they're new. I don't care if they're vintage. Doesn't matter to me. Our cars in our household consist of a 2015 Honda Accord that has 200,000 miles on it and a 2019 Honda Pilot. Which I have children, so you can probably make a Happy Meal just by going in the back seat with the amount of shit that's on the floor.
Gross.
So we just, don't really like love our cars much. They're just a means to an end. We'll drive both into the ground and then eventually buy other nondescript vehicles to drive after these two, whichever one Ashley can get the best deal on, because I don't like a car payment. So for me, I don't get the appeal. And so during these scenes, I just kind of rolled my eyes because these types of dudes, like in real life, not my favorite types of guys.
No, Gene, I died a little bit inside when I see them wreck that 67 Camaro. That thing looked, I mean, granted, it was like, 15 years old when it was in this movie. Those cars are beautiful. They're in great shape. That Dodge Charger, the Dukes of Hazzard, the General Lee, to get one of those today is a small fortune. I would love to have any of these cars, but it also hurt me deep inside. Any car over 20 years is an antique. And Ash, like you said, it got me thinking about the age of the cars. Vanessa still drives a 2002 RAV4 that we bought on eBay. It has 180,000 miles, has never had any engine problem. Now it burns a little bit of oil. We've done the brakes, but this thing just won't die. And is it really an antique 20 years?
I mean, cars last way longer now than they did in the 70s. Like, it was a miracle to have a car from the 50s that was running in the 70s. I found out that in Arizona, 25 years constitutes a historic vehicle. So when I bought my Miata and everybody from Shappy Hour crowdfunded that Zero Wipes license plate, when I went to register, they're like, would you like the historic plate or the regular one? Like, my 1993 Miata is not a historic vehicle. It's a badass race car that makes the panties drop. Ash, I totally respect your stance on cars. I get it. But I got to say that is why so many automakers are pumping out these blah vehicles. That's why every compact SUV looks exactly the same. Every sedan looks exactly the same. And Ash, I got to implore you, you spend loads of time in your car. It's your primary conveyance other than your legs. Other than walking, it is the way you get around the most in your life. You're on those Texas freeways. You're driving to New Orleans and back. Why wouldn't you want something fun, something engaging, something that you sit in and you go, fuck yeah.
I want something that I sit in that doesn't hurt my ass when I ride too long in it. And that gets really good gas mileage because I'm cheap and I don't want to spend a lot of money on gas. And preferably that I don't need a whole lot of oil changes very often. And as long as it's not red or blue. Other than that, I could give two fucks about what my car looks like. I really could. And again, Jane, I don't want to make this like you don't have kids, but like again, you don't have kids. Like kids trash your fucking car. Like my car, I got in 2018, but it was a 2019, and so Ellie was a baby, and within like 6 months, the car looked like they'd owned it for 5 years because children trash your fucking car. They spill shit in it. They throw shit everywhere. They intentionally drop a Fruit Loop to crunch it into the ground. They trash your car. And when there's more than one of them, they tag team trash your car.
Well, Ash, they have this new invention called a vacuum.
Oh,
so
no,
what I'll do is I take it out
We
into
have
the
one
car.
in the car, and I vacuum constantly.
Oh, okay.
But everything is everywhere. I got Barbies. I've got cars, monster trucks. It's a nightmare.
Emma's got this rule. You bring it in the car, you take it out of the car. If you don't take it out of the car after a week, we'll put it somewhere.
You just have one. I'm telling you.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
That second one, they tag team you.
4 dogs. 4 dogs. And that's why they get in Sarah's car, because they're not allowed in the Miata and they can't ride motorcycles. Fantastic. Listen, when I was a kid, my mom had a Toyota Celica, 2 doors on it, stick shift, hand crank sunroof. And these were the rules. No food or drink in the car. No toys in the car. The car, you get in the back. And you know, you had to like climb over the seat to get in the back. I didn't know until I was much older and had friends who had kids that kids were allowed to even bring shit in the car. That was mind blowing to me.
But I will defend Ash in one way. We took an Uber back from Boston like 5 days ago. Emma goes, wow, this thing's nice. The minivans today are nice. The Toyotas and the Hondas, they're a nice ride. Yeah. You're in a minivan, but it's
My
still
Pilot's a panty dropper.
Yeah.
Hold on. I didn't know we're bringing vans into the conversation. Vans are like the greatest vehicles of all time. I'm all about it. My dream vehicle is a blacked out Pacifica hybrid. Oh, God. Give me that plug-in hybrid. Chrysler Pacifica. Mwah. I'd kill somebody for
dropping just thinking about it.
I'll only buy a foreign car.
Yeah. But so unlike this podcast, I love this movie because it does not waste our time. It starts off, they're not showing us shit that's not important. I don't need to see Arnie romancing Leigh. I don't need to see the junkyard repair montage where Arnie is digging through for parts other than that one hubcap. I don't need to see Arnie, have another breakdown with his family at the New Year's Eve party. This movie knows what's important to me. Christine is alive and Arnie has been helplessly transformed. Everything else, cut that shit.
I know this is going to sound weird coming from Shat the Movies because we always articulate everything perfectly. But I think we need to rephrase our opinion on long movies. Like we often say 90 minutes is the sweet spot for movies and anything longer can kick rocks. But really, we don't hate long movies. We hate wasted time in movies. This movie is 2 hours long, but it flies by. It moves from point to point. We get everything we need, none of what we don't need. I agree with you, Big D. Great job on the pacing.
I mean, I stand by 90 minutes for most of the time still. I think that 90 minutes is a great goal line. But I agree, not much wasted time. But one thing I did struggle with a little bit was Arnie. So I don't know if it was the actor or if it was the character, but I thought he got progressively more annoying as he was supposed to get progressively more like intimidating, because just becoming like a greaser was okay. You know, I just didn't really enjoy the transition. And if you're not familiar, he's played by Keith Gordon, who was a relatively unknown guy. He wasn't like a movie star. And I just didn't find him interesting. And if it was the actor, maybe it was the way that like he like pornographically approached the car, which I know is a part of the role. But seeing Keith Gordon do it, I wasn't sold on it. And I found out that a super young Kevin Bacon was originally cast in this role by John Carpenter. That was his first pick, but it didn't work out. And thinking about a super young, pre-Footloose Kevin Bacon, I think I could have dealt with him as Arnie a lot better than Keith Gordon.
It's so crazy you said that, because I thought Dennis for a few minutes was Kevin Bacon. I was like, hell yeah, Kevin Bacon. And that's who Kevin Bacon should have played, was Dennis. Like the jock friend, he would have been perfect for it.
Well, do you remember Dennis? What else was he in? He plays almost the same role. Motorhead, Shop Class, High School, My Science Project.
Oh, My Science Project.
I thought Dennis Hopper was the cop in this again. I was like, wow, they're both in the movie. You know, and I again mixed up Dennis Hopper and Harry Dean Stanton. I think they're the same person sometimes. So I was like, wow, they're both in this movie. They're both in that, but very different actors. But I like his portrayal of the character. He plays the nerd in the beginning very well. I think he transforms nicely. And that scene when he gets his father out into the hallway and the dad's trying to like, you don't talk to your mother that way. And he quickly turns, grabs him by the throat and slaps him in the face in this condescending manner and says, oh, I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to go to sleep. That turn, that was terrifying. And I think he pulled it off well.
I got to ask, Big D. I feel like if I was a father and I had a son and that son grew up and he challenged me to a fight in a sense by slapping me,
yeah.
That fight doesn't end until someone's dead. I don't think I could allow my son to beat me in a fight.
Well, I had this incident. I probably talked about this in the podcast, that I had this coming to blows with my father probably when I was maybe 19. And he got up in my face and touched my nose. And it was that where it was out in the Serengeti and the pride and the alpha male. He got in my face and I put him on the floor. Oh. It was the last time that he ever got in my face, and our relationship was better after that. I think you deal with it as it comes.
I don't mean to make light of this, but can you define touching your nose?
It was one of those that he accused me of doing something and came up pointing and pushing the tip of his finger into my nose. And I remember grabbing him and saying, old man, stop it, and shoving him back onto the floor. And he never got physical with me again.
That's a real Arnold Schwarzenegger moment for you there. Old man, stop it.
Listen, it was a poignant moment.
After that?
Listen, it was a poignant moment. It was a turning point in my life.
Well, Ash, if you're not a big Keith Gordon fan and you haven't seen Back to School, I highly recommend it. It came out a few years after this with Rodney Dangerfield. I don't think any 80s actor could play repressed kid turned cool better than Keith Gordon. I think he's great in it. And when I lived in Ohio, I ran into a lot of like dudes that try to look tough when they go to this thing called Rally at the Square. Rally at the Square was like a concert series they had in Lima, Ohio, where like people like Eddie Money would come and play. And there were all these old dudes trying to look tough. And they'd do that thing where it's like a red dress shirt, black leather vest, and like fucking like, you know, cool guy jeans, just being slick. And I like that he went with that corny ass version of what a tough guy looks like. I was sold on Arnie.
And Gene, just a quick scheduling note. On January 17th of 2023, Back to School will be released. It was commissioned by Eric C. The film came out in 1986, and it is a wonderful time capsule of 1986.
It inspired me for my first and last time using a diving board. During a football game, Dennis becomes distracted upon noticing Arnie kissing his new girlfriend, Leigh Cabot, and suffers a career-ending injury. One of Christine's windshield wipers stops working while Arnie and Leigh are on a date at a drive-in movie theater. When Arnie gets out to fix it, Leigh begins to choke on a hamburger as an oldies rock and roll song starts to play on the radio. The doors lock themselves, but she frees herself and is saved when a man in a nearby car administers the Heimlich maneuver. Soon after, school bully Buddy Repperton, angry with Arnie over being expelled after a confrontation in shop class, vandalizes Christine along with his gang. So before there was Buddy Revell in 3 O'Clock High, there was Buddy Repperton. And clearly they both fit the 80s bully stereotype, right? You got the leather jacket, the swagger, and the body of a 30-year-old man. But I have to ask you two, who would win in a fight between Buddy Revell and Buddy Repperton? Because Revell has a proven track record. He'll fight anyone, any day. We know his history and his lore. But Repperton here, he looks like he could be Buddy Revell's dad. He carries a switchblade.
Yes.
He doesn't seem to have a moral code of any sort. And so I'm putting my money on Repperton.
Well, if we had the weigh-in and the face-off, before like the match, you look at Repperton and you're like, the actor was William Ostrander. He was only 23 when they filmed it, but he looks like a well-built 33-year-old man. He's jacked where Buddy wasn't. You think he has a really dark disposition. He looks like he would stab you. Those sideburns, those chops, you have to go with Repperton. But then Repper turns into be soft. He doesn't have the fortitude to actually go through and physically fight someone, so we don't know he has the capability.
Oh, this Buddy would murder the other Buddy, I think, in a heartbeat. I think Buddy Repperton is so sinister, and he has no humor like Buddy Revell does in 3 O'Clock High. Like, Buddy Revell's in on the joke at the end when he gives him the money back. Like, he's aware of, like, what's happening, and I think he's, like, proud of our protagonist in 3 O'Clock High. This Buddy, this is the horror movie version of that bully where the teachers don't realize that they have a grown-ass man in the classroom, like that's just sitting there, that's like failed so many times and a part of the system and can stay until 21. And so like they can legally drink and come to school. This dude is so grown. He's not going to get in a fight. He's going to assault these people. Like he's going to catch a case for it. I think Buddy Repperton wins every time.
I mean, you just look at his team, like the heavyset guy, he just grabs Dennis's like balls
Moochie.
And is squeezing them and like, yeah. And Buddy's like, Urgh. Like that is not in all my fights, I've never seen somebody come from behind and just grab a dude's dick. But that's the way Buddy's team rolls.
Yeah, Buddy Repperton also looks like if they made a Jim Morrison action figure. Like, that's how terrifying he is. Just think about that for a second. At home, in your car, Jim Morrison action figure with a knife. I have one more question, which is when Dennis is tackled and injured in the football game, the movie seems pretty clear that it's his spine. They bring out the stretcher, they carry him off the field, and later he confirms that in the hospital by saying that if it were just a few centimeters over, he'd be paralyzed. But then they have him in the hospital. He's laid up in the same room for like several months with zero explanation. He's got zero spinal stabilization. And if it was his leg and they were keeping him in the hospital for that, they'd at least have him in traction, where they have the leg kind of up and strapped to all that shit. That's not going on either. So from what his injuries seem to be, they normally send you home, you go to rehab, and you get on with life. But then you see him get out of the hospital and he's got no cast on his leg. And then he's got a cast on his leg. I don't know what the fuck is going on with Dennis. It doesn't add up.
But I mean, it's got to be fairly serious. He was in there from October. I think the game was like the second week in October until late December because he misses Thanksgiving. But to be honest, I don't give a shit. I don't care what his injuries are. In any other Stephen King movie, we would have gotten a 15-minute long montage in the hospital of him struggling to relearn to walk, doing physical therapy. Like, he falls down, he gets back up. And then that would have been like called back to later in the movie when he's forced upon to push down on the gas in that bulldozer.
It could be the opposite of the Footloose montage, right? It's just music playing, but he's not going anywhere. I like it. Well, Christine seeks out the vandals, crushing Moochie in an alley, triggering a gas station explosion that kills Don and Richie, and finally hunting down and killing Buddy himself. After the badly burned Christine returns to Darnell's garage, Darnell sits in the driver's seat and is crushed to death against the steering wheel. The next morning, Christine is back in her slot and fully repaired, with Darnell's body still in the driver's seat. State Police Detective Rudolph Junkins becomes suspicious but has no direct evidence to implicate Arnie, who has an alibi and denies all involvement. So if I haven't made it clear yet, John Carpenter is the fucking man. The 80s were a cesspool of camera tricks, and we've seen most of them. There's the fast motion, there's the slow motion, all kinds of bullshit. And I've always asked why directors who make perfectly good movies that we've covered decide to pull those gimmicks willy-nilly right in the middle of the movie. And I think it's because the truly great ones can actually pull these things off. When Christine is damaged and starts to repair herself, my jaws dropped, and I'm like, how the fuck did they do that in 1983? Was there some sort of a robotic car that puts itself back together? And then I realized it's just reversed film. Check it out. If you haven't seen this movie or haven't seen it in a while, watch the scene where she repairs herself. It looks great.
Well, and clearly this is how Carpenter avoids like a typical like King stumbling block, which is that usually what ruins a Stephen King film are the really shitty special effects, right? So think, I don't know, the giant spider in it. Think the reveal of the Langoliers. Oh, they look terrible. It just makes what King has produced in his head not look at all like what it's supposed to look like on screen.
Was the Langoliers the one where it was like a 3D Pac-Man thing?
Yeah, where they're eating the day before. Like, so they're like clearing the day before out of the way so the new day can come. Yeah, and they're like chop, 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 chop.
Okay, when I was a kid, I remember that was on TV, right?
Yes, it was a miniseries.
I thought it looked amazing. I'm guessing not.
No, go back and watch it on YouTube. It is one of the most laughable things. And I think that the issue is because so much King was adapted in like a TV miniseries, because the two I just mentioned were, or by really shitty directors, that it doesn't just look bad for like the 80s and early 90s. It just looks bad even compared to 80s and early 90s special effects problems. But this, though, not only does this work, it looks like it was done in 2022. Like it's beautifully done. You can find no fault in it. And it's a badass effect. And it's one of the only parts of this movie I found actually scary, to see this car that you think is destroyed, like put itself back together again. Like that is pretty scary.
But Gene, I found it terrifying for a different reason. I was just crying inside for these poor cars. These are beautiful works of art. And as each one of these crunching scenes, I'm thinking, okay, that's one less car, one less car. They used 24 different cars when they were making the film, and they used a couple different ones because they're all relatively the same body style. There was the Belvederes, the Savoy, and the Fury. They painted all the cars red. They had the red interior. And the movie just destroys them. They're beautiful. They're shiny. They're in great shape. It's hard to watch. And most of the cars they used, the 24, got scrapped. 3 supposedly survived. And they put one on sale in 2020. It auctioned off. It went for $275,000. And you think about it. They only made 5,303 1958 Plymouth Furies. You break off or you destroy a big batch of these cars, they're going to become more expensive and they're hard to find. We talked about the 69 or the 68 Charger. Every time I see the Dukes of Hazzard, it breaks my heart. They've destroyed over 200 of them in that show, from 68 to I think 71 were the model Chargers they used. All ended up in the junkyard. You're lucky to get a good one now for like 70 grand. As someone who loves cars and would only dream about owning one of these, watching them just destroyed on screen, oh, it broke my heart.
See, and I like that they destroyed them, because I think the most effective chase scene in this movie is the flaming car chase scene. So, you know, the crew created that gas station just to blow it up. They built it from scratch just to make it explode. And I think what works here is that just like getting chased by a car is scary, like that would suck, getting chased by a flaming car is next level scary. And this is going to sound weird, but like Christine looks so pretty all lit up like that, like the flames reflecting on that red paint. It was awesome. So you get this whole like chrome, bright red old vehicle backlit by fire to show how evil what's inside of it actually is. Like it works.
See, maybe you are a secret car person. Imagine if she was a 2015 Honda Accord on fire. You wouldn't care.
No, but I would if it were my 2019 Honda Pilot, which is silver.
Yeah. But John Carpenter has, like you talk about signature moves, Gene. He always does that. Pew! And you get the lens flare. It works on these headlights. When it is driving down the street, Christine, she's on fire. She is like an animal stalking prey. And the fire is going through the grill of the car. It looks like a giant smile. Ash, you mentioned earlier Maximum Overdrive. It reminded me of the Green Goblin. It is entirely sinister. It doesn't look like a car. It looks like a flying demon on wheels. But I do have to call bullshit on one thing. If I'm being chased by a killer car, I'm going to go where the car can't get me. I'm not going to run down the middle of a highway.
Yeah, but Moochie proved that doesn't even save you. He went down like an alley into an industrial site and got into a space that was too small for Christine. But Christine said, fuck it, I'll squeeze my ass in and take your legs.
Yeah, but there's something we haven't talked about because we're talking about how Christine looks like a sinister demon on wheels and all of that. But I want to just ask, I don't want to be the wah-wah, but why? Why is she so evil? Because one of the biggest changes from the book to the screen is the whole impetus for why the car turns evil in the first place. And in the book, it's possessed by its former owner. And when they created this film, they decided not to go with that storyline. And instead, they just were like, well, she's evil. And that was it. And I guess for me, it limits how scary this movie can be. Because if this is an origin story, if it's we're trying to meet Christine for the first time, I want to know what her origin story is. I need to know, did somebody die in the car? Did they sacrifice a virgin on the hood? Was the car constructed on an Indian burial ground? I don't care what the reason is. I just needed the why. And I was really bummed that we didn't get it throughout the movie.
Well, she was built in Detroit, which means she likely was built in an Indian burial ground. But you're totally right, Ash, that origin stories and details make a difference. When I was up in Michigan this last time, one of Sarah's uncles was telling me a legend about the lake that they live on. He said, did you ever hear about the guy who didn't come back? I said, no, what's that? He said, yeah, over there on that hill where no houses are built, this guy came with a boat and he parked it at the edge of that hill and he walked into those woods and he never came back. And I'm like, okay, who was this guy? Why was he going into the woods? Give me some details. Even something superstitious about the date or something that happened beforehand. You need to build some ambiance around the situation. Otherwise, it's just a guy who disappeared. It's just a car that kills people.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So I know I'm going to be a hypocrite here because I'm usually the one who is saying I need rules and parameters laid out. In this case, I don't care. The car is possessed. Sounds good to me. It's going to kill teens. If you show me some Indian burial ground where the car was parked or built, I can just poke holes in it. When there's no story or origin, I just have to accept what they're showing me.
Does this mean now that you apologize for your critiques of Mortal Kombat?
Yeah, I probably was a little harsh on that. Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. Because you literally just went completely back as you were demanding on the boat for them to give you a tournament-style breakdown of all rules and the origin of the tournament.
But here's my problem. What they were telling me didn't make sense. Just say, if we don't win this tournament, the Earth will be destroyed.
They did.
Okay. No, but they told, there was a lot more to it.
No, that's what they said.
Ash, if you hadn't told me that in the book, Christine is possessed by a former owner, I thought the movie had given us a reason, and maybe I just read too much into it. In that opening scene, I thought it was the sweat and the steam and the horsepower and the man juice of Detroit's auto manufacturing might, that 50s masculine culture. This car was rebelling against that. She was like, fuck men, I'm going to fuck them over. That's what I thought the whole message of the movie was. Instead, it was just probably just a dead person.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe. I think that's one of the themes you could definitely get from this movie, because I do think it's a lot about love and inanimate objects. Arnie and Christine, they clearly have a relationship of some kind. She makes him better looking, like a lot of women do with their men's. She gives him confidence. He keeps her lubed and gassed up. Even when she's jealous of Arnie's real life girlfriend. The idea, I think, is explored fairly well here. But what I find interesting, I couldn't help when watching this to not think about what came after it. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this movie, but there was a brilliant movie that came out last year. It was a French film. It won the Palme d'Or in 2021, and it was called Titane. And it's a movie that I couldn't get out of my head while watching Christine, because it's a horror film like this. And it's about a woman that performs at car shows, and she is seduced by an evil car. But they take it one step further, because there's this very famous scene in this movie where she has sex with the car. She has sex with the gear shift, and she winds up pregnant by the car. And it's this whole metaphor about violence against women by the most like representative male icon, as you were saying here, Gene, the muscle car. So it's kind of the same, but not really, because that's like high art film and this is, Stephen King. But I don't know if a movie like that would have ever existed without a movie like Christine First. So I kind of love that an 83 like horror film that a lot of people have not seen and or forgotten about, like produce what is arguably one of the best films, like top 3 from last year.
Dennis and Leigh set a trap for Christine at Darnell's garage. Christine crashes through Darnell's office and Arnie is fatally impaled on a shard of glass. Dennis and Leigh attack Christine with a bulldozer until she is unable to regenerate. The next day, Dennis, Leigh, and Junkins watch as Christine's remains are compacted by a car crusher in a junkyard. As the camera zooms in slowly on the car's remains, a portion of the front grille twitches slightly before going still. So Dennis is allegedly Arnie's best friend, and Leigh is allegedly his ex-girlfriend / girlfriend. And Dennis and Leigh, they are getting along nicely toward the end of the movie. Poor Arnie, he's over here losing his mind to a killer car. Dennis and Leigh, they're snuggling each other while planning an ambush. I'm pretty convinced that they just wanted him out of the picture at this point in the movie so they could start dating. And I wondered, if you're trying to stop Christine, the car is evil. Don't you want to take Arnie, who is your friend / ex-boyfriend, isolate him and then destroy the car on its own? They're like, no, fuck it. We're going to ambush him in the car. Why not?
No, Gene, that makes complete sense. And there was a cut scene where Arnie actually catches them kissing, and that's what sets him over the edge. But I have a better question for you, Gene, here. Besides the fact of separating him and Christine, why does Detective Junkins call them heroes at the end? Let's go over the scene. There's a dead teenager. They crushed his car. Okay. There's no proof that Arnie did anything wrong. If I was that detective, I would have thought, okay, maybe Dennis and Leigh were having an affair. They vandalized Arnie's car the first time, and this time he caught them in the act, and then they were forced to stab him with a glass shard. That makes as much sense as them being heroes for killing a demon car and Arnie flying out in some fit of rage.
I've got to say, I was proud of them, though, for not having Arnie have some sort of like change of heart where he tried to stop Christine and ends up saving his friends or whatever. He needed to die. I was glad they were mature enough to let him die.
No, I completely agree about that. I liked the end of this movie for a couple of reasons. So the end of this film, like the book, it implies that Christine is kind of still alive in the end. But I'm glad that this didn't turn into like a string of Christine movies, like Christine's Back on the Highway, Ride of Rage, Christine 3. Like, I'm glad that didn't take place over the next decade. Because I, like Eugene, love that Arnie succumbs to his car lover. I think it's very like Little Shop of Horrors, like the way that Audrey 2 eats Seymour in the end. It's the only way that you get a satisfying ending. But I will say that the other reason I'm relieved about the sequel not happening is that I was getting really tired of the shtick of this film at the end. It's kind of like a poorly done slasher film. Unless each death is more absurd, like, Tatum going through the garage door and Scream and dying that way, and like deaths getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Slasher films are kind of boring because you can only watch a guy stab people so many times without getting bored. And I think the same is true here. I didn't know how many more times I could watch a car chase somebody down because it wasn't getting more and more ridiculous. So I think it's good that we put Christine to bed when we did, because it was getting kind of long in the tooth for me at 2 hours of watching the headlights chase another dude down a darkened highway.
Once again, this movie gives us exactly enough and not too much. This ending works. You're totally right, Ash. I like that they're saying, like, she isn't dead, but she isn't hurting anyone again. And I agree that a sequel would just be too much. They didn't run out of ideas, but they just hit their limit. Well, now's the time in the podcast where we give our Shat score for Christine. Our wipe score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes out of respective butts. 0 Wipes is a perfect movie. It is writing strikingly similar novels, so popular with the American public that film studios will buy the rights to make the movie versions even before you publish the book. And 5 Wipes is an absolute disaster. It is spending your life being called Moochie and grabbing dicks only to die by having a killer car crush you at the hips. For me, this is a 1.5 wipe movie. I imagine the challenges that John Carpenter faced that could have torpedoed this movie. A paper-thin plot, total throwaway characters, a largely flat cast, and a movie about a killer car who makes men fall in love with her. This really, by all means, should have been a crap film, but somehow Carpenter made it work. And also, cheers to Keith Gordon, who did an incredible job with the lead character of Arnie. And I'm so glad that we're going to be doing Back to School with Keith Gordon and Rodney Dangerfield. Really looking forward to that next year. 1.5 wipes for me.
Yeah, I mean, I liked this movie. I thought it was fun. I thought it was really well shot. It was generally well acted, but I was bummed out by a couple of things. One, I really did need that origin story. And two, like one thing we haven't talked about, this movie wasn't scary. Like this wasn't a scary film I found at all. And I'm not saying I need jump scares, but I didn't feel like it was an overtly frightening film. Like, yes, it would be scary to be chased down by a car, but because it's such like kind of a ridiculous concept, I didn't feel any fear at all. And I was bummed out by that.
Do you think that you would have been more scared by this movie or more into this movie if Christine was actually just a car and it was Arnie who was just losing his mind and becoming more and more violent and killing people?
Absolutely, because I think psychological horror is the scariest thing that exists.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think we just made a much better film, Gene Lyons.
Christine 2!
Christine 2, back on the road of rage. But I still felt like it was a fun movie, regardless of all of those things. It was a fun movie that was well made. It feels like a John Carpenter film, which means automatically I'm going to absolutely love and find appeal in the way that it's shot and the way that it's constructed. It's just a little less scary than I'm used to getting with him. So for me, it's definitely above average, but I'm a little higher than Eugene. I'm saying this is 2 wipes.
For me, I know I'm letting my memories of the film and my nostalgia glasses affect my score, but I don't care. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to do 0.75 wipes. I think it's some of King's strongest material. And I think when you combine that with Carpenter, who's coming off of Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, and The Thing, it's the perfect choice. He was able to transfer every ounce of terror, of horror, of just unease out of the premise of a killer car and put it on the screen, where most of King's concepts are ridiculous. It was a joke. The way they did the dead lights, here the dead lights in the car as Lee is choking, it worked where others failed. Unfortunately, I think the following years have given us mostly more of the shit subpar Stephen King adaptations. But this, paired with Carpenter, it was a perfect mix, and I think it's a 0.75 movie.
All right, with 3/4 of a wipe from Big D, 2 wipes from Ash, and 1.5 wipes from me, that gives us an average wipe score of 1.41 wipes.
So, Gene, with a score of 1.41 repeating wipes, that now ties this in the 85 spot with Total Recall, The Mummy, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and One Crazy Summer.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I mean, again, if it's under 100, you're in the top third. I think it's where it belongs. I think it's a great combination. It wouldn't have worked without either King or Carpenter.
Yeah, fair score. Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Gene, next week, aspiring Florida defense lawyer Kevin accepts a high-powered position at a New York law firm headed by legal shark John Milton. As Kevin moves up the firm's ranks, his wife, Mary Ann, has several frightening
Selling movie phone over there.
Yeah, his wife, Mary Ann.
Aspiring Florida defense lawyer Kevin and his wife, Mary Ann.
As Kevin moves up the firm's ranks, his wife, Mary Ann, has several frightening, mystical experiences that begin to warp her sense of reality. With the stakes getting higher with each case, Kevin quickly learns that his mentor is planning a far greater evil than simply winning without scruples. This was commissioned by Andy S., released in October of 1997, and it's about time we had some more Keanu in our lives.
I am so excited. I love this movie. This is a scary movie. This is a dark, sinister, exorcism-y type movie. I'm fucking ready.
Well, thank you, Andy, for your upcoming commission. Thank you, Maddie, for commissioning Christine. And thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, just go to shatpod.com and use the SpeakPipe feature. You can support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we do TV series such as Lovecraft Country, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, Watchmen, and we just wrapped up Westworld. You can find all the information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-hosts, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
A young attorney has the chance of a lifetime.
Milton Chadwick Waters.
We want you to come to New York. All expenses, first class, travel and lodging, you and your wife.
Oh my God.
He will enter a place of wealth and ambition.
We've got 40 partners vested at the moment. In addition to our corporate clients, we're currently representing about 25 foreign countries. He's got you scheduled for 15 minutes, so make the most of it.
John Milton. Kevin Lomax. Well, what's that like? One day you're putting them away, next day you're setting them free. Takes a little getting used to. Pays better though, doesn't it? Welcome to Babylon, Ma. Speak of the devil.
A world of power and seduction.
Who's that with the senator?
Controlled by one man.
I swear he can hear us. Hell, he can smell us.
He will make your dreams come true.
Want to come upstairs and... Now?
He will grant your fondest wish.
I'm just warming my hands on your talent. You know what I see? I see the future of this law firm.
He knows your greatest fear.
Milton is into everything. Arms brokering, chemical weapons, toxic waste, money laundering for the Eastern Bloc. I mean, it goes on and on.
I don't like it here, Kevin.
And he knows the price of your soul.
Let's make a baby. Who are you? Oh, I have so many names. I'm here on the ground with my nose in it since the whole thing began. God likes to watch. He's an absentee landlord.
Keanu Reeves.
He's always been there. I know that now.
Al Pacino.
As God sleeps late.
We will win.
It's my time now.
The Devil's Advocate.